For more on the coming impeachment trial of former President Donald Trump, let's bring in constitutional law professor Robert Tsai from Boston University School of Law. Professor Tsai, thanks very much for joining us. We've now seen former President Trump's legal team's expected defense. They laid it out in a couple of briefs, and the bulk of it is arguing that putting a former president on trial, a private citizen, is unconstitutional, not foreseen by the framers, not provided for in the Constitution in several places. How do you respond to that? We haven't done it before.
I think the Constitution's language itself is actually equivocal on this point. But we've got some parts of the Constitution that limit the kinds of sanctions that can be meted out. But obviously nothing that clearly speaks to this question of what happens to someone once they're a former official. Now, I think you're right that the weight of the expert views seem to fall on the side of allowing this to happen, partly because there'd be some strange consequences if the answer were no. Someone could just tender their resignations, right before being impeached, for example, and escape the consequences that the framers clearly wanted. So, what we've seen in the past is that the House, in such circumstances, has proceeded to impeach some former officials in similar circumstances. And then we've sometimes seen what we might see this time, which is that the Senate will have its own view about this and perhaps price the question of whether this is constitutional kind of into each senator's own view as to the verdict.
So we may start with that constitutional argument, may end with it as well. There could be a motion to dismiss. Now, it's a constitutional process, impeachment, reserved to the political branches. This is not a criminal trial in a court. So what goes into prosecuting or defending a case like this, in the political branch of government, and what can we expect to see?
Absolutely. I think that the task in front of the House managers is a fairly tall one. What they want ultimately is to hold the former president accountable, but also to sort of put him in a permanent political exile. And this, of course, is going to be controversial from the get-go. They also have to, lay out facts that's sufficient to really convince enough senators to cross over to the other side and to believe that when the president gave that speech on January 6th, that he meant to rile that crowd up and then point that crowd up the hill with the corrupt purpose of trying to stop the counting. They believe they've got enough here. But the defense is going to have a very different story to tell, in which, if you look at the president's own words, he doesn't actually specifically say to do anything illegal. I think this is one reason why there's going to be a huge dispute about the relevance of the president's actions and words before January 6th. I think we'll see that the House managers will try to make his speech the culmination of an entire plan to subvert a constitutional process to hang on to power despite having lost the election, whereas, and you can already see this in the brief, Mr. Trump's lawyers are going to try to argue that all of this is just an irrelevant narrative, as they say.
So the consequences of not holding President Trump accountable is one of the political forces that drove this with the Democrats and some Republicans as well. As you look at the constitutional language there, as you read it, it is ambiguous. How much weight will it be sort of on the statecraft side, on senators and members of the House first, who had to stand up and say, this is something we're off the trajectory of American history. There was an attack on the Capitol to interfere with the constitutional process, encouraged at the very least by the president. Isn't that what's driving it here more than the legal questions?
I think that's right, and I think it's the appropriate question, because there are many of us who study the Constitution who believe that the impeachment mechanism is not as effective in terms of holding a president accountable in the way that the framers had hoped. For example, they designed the impeachment mechanism in a world in which they didn't believe that two parties could become national powers and hold their elected officials to such, partisan views. They believed that people would be able to move back and forth pretty easily and do what was best in the eyes of the country. And we really haven't seen that. So you're absolutely right that this is really an important political moment for us, because I think that what the senators are going to have to keep in mind is that we're going to see more elected officials aspire to power like Donald Trump. We've already seen whiffs of this in the kinds of things and things that people say and positions that are taken when we look at people like Senator Ted Cruz and of course, Senator Josh Hawley, ambitious people who will either do what is popular or to think about constitutional limitations. So I think this is an incredibly important moment that I hope that the senators take seriously. There's another question that I think that hopefully they'll keep in mind, and that is the role of the First Amendment. It's certainly the case, I think, that the president enjoys the right, just like any other ordinary citizen, to speak, particularly on controversial questions. Otherwise, how could we expect the president to get anything done? On the other hand, I think that we as voters are entitled to hold someone who occupies such an important position, which exercises such vast power, to a different kind of standard than what ordinary citizens are held to. And so I think that's going to be maybe an even more important question in some ways. Do we want in the future presidents to be able to say whatever they want, to corrode the democratic process, to deny that there's something called constitutional limits? Or do you frankly hope that future presidents will accept things like a peaceful transition of authority and every person's sacred right to vote? I hope that the senators keep all of those things in mind.
Robert Tsai, constitutional law professor from Boston University, thanks for helping us sort out some of these thorny questions in the Trump second impeachment.
My pleasure.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.